Hi, thank you for joining me on the Path for Health podcast. My name is Brandy Lloyd, and I will be your host. I am a functional nutritional therapy practitioner and personal trainer. I've had a long career as a personal trainer, but about 10 years ago, my health status began to unravel. I eventually was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called spondyloarthropathy. This is an inflammatory arthritis that affects nearly every joint in my body, including my spine. After a long road of discovering food allergies, incorporating stress management techniques, focusing on time on gut healing and hormone balance, I have finally found the restoration for my health. At this time, I am prescription free and hope to remain that way, but I'm open and grateful for whatever lies ahead. Most of my time is now spent helping people just like me, people who are trying to find answers to improve their health through diet and lifestyle changes. This podcast is for educational purposes. Please consult your doctor before making any changes based on what you learn here. My goal is to educate and inspire you. So please don't forget to leave a comment and share this podcast with your own circle of people. And I hope you reach out to me too. I have many different types of educational platforms and support. Now let's get on with the show. Hi, thank you for tuning back into the Path for Health podcast. I am Brandy, and I'm ready to get into today's topic of snacking. I'm going to start today off by telling you a little story about myself. When I first met my husband, oh my gosh, that was literally about 30 years ago, he knew to keep me fed. I mean, we needed to eat every 2 hours. Fortunately, we met, both of us, working in a restaurant. I don't know if any of you California people remember the Velvet Creamery, but that's where we met. I was a little waitress. He was behind the counter sandwich guy. It was a sandwich and ice cream place, and there's constantly food around. I've been an athlete for most of my life, and it was just kind of how I grew up, was just always like feeding the machine kind of attitude. But it wasn't just about being an athlete and having to feed the machine. There was also a lot of blood sugar dysregulation in my family. We didn't realize that it was an issue. We just thought that this is how it was. So both my sister and I were diagnosed as kids as being hypoglycemic. So the theory then, and what I did for, most of my life, was to just have small meals or snacks every 2 to 3 hours. And I kind of trained kept my body going with that kind of constant fuel coming in. But I also trained my mind and just kind of my emotions, that everything was always centered around having to find easily accessible food for me. And even if we're taking a long drive, it's like, okay, make sure we bring the snacks. And frankly, that's even how I raised our boys for the most of their childhood. It wasn't until I was actually starting to sort out my hormones and my autoimmune condition that I realized that I could have healthy blood sugar regulation, and I could actually experience what that's like. And that's why I would like to share that with you today. So snacking is basically just eating between meals, or in the case of dinner, just eating after dinner. And I'm going to say right up front that if you are 40 and older, snacking is just a no-no. It just doesn't really agree with us, and we're going to talk about why. The truth is that if you're eating the right diet in the right amount, and by amount I'm saying amount of macronutrient ratios, like your carbs, your fats, and your proteins, but also in the size of the meal itself. If you're eating the right diet in the right amounts, you really shouldn't need the snack. So the first question I ask when I'm reviewing a food journal and I'm working with a new client and I see snacks is, did you need to snack, or did you just want to snack? Is it a habit or a need? And I'm not really interested in their want factor because most of the time when people come to me, they realize that they need to make some changes, and they realize that what they want and what they have been doing isn't working. So I'm really trying to distinguish, is this like a need of the body, or is this just a habit, like a behavior situation that we need to work with? So let's go back to the beginning of snacking, or the history of snacking. It starts with the invention of processed foods. And that's not a shocker. The processed foods, hello, snacking. No one even really knows where the advice of needing to eat every 2 hours to improve your metabolism, right? Have you heard that? I remember hearing that. I don't ever remember saying it, but I've definitely heard it for most of my life. I've even heard it in the professional world, even as recent as this year. I am still shocked to hear some of the advice that is given in regards to metabolism. Eating every 2 hours will improve your metabolism. I'm going to tell you right now that there's absolutely no scientific fact behind that recommendation whatsoever, yet somehow we've all heard it. Now, our bodies are designed to go 4 or more hours between meals. We're really efficient, and this is easily done when you consume the right foods in the right ratios. And now I'm talking about that ratio of carbs, fats, and proteins. So around 60 years ago, we were told to start consuming more carbs and less fats. That whole grain, eating more whole grains, low fat, don't eat the eggs, don't eat the bacon, have your cereal and your toast and your orange juice kind of generation, right? Sadly, my 15-year-old son, who's going to an excellent school, but they have health curriculum, nutrition curriculum that is approved and regulated by the state of California, and he is actually still learning that even this week. He's come home every day from school just rolling his eyes, and he just can't believe the information that he is being told. As a matter of fact, he is told that 75% of his plate needs to be carbohydrates. Absolutely crazy. Along with that, they're also telling the students that fast food really isn't that bad for you, and that eating fast food, what was it, 8 times, was it 8 times a month? Yeah, eating fast food 2 times a week or 8 times a month is really okay. To which my son is like, oh my gosh, that's almost 100 times a year. And so to sit and listen to him tell me about what he has learned just by living with a nutritionist about trans fats and macronutrients, he's just over the top frustrated with this. And he also realizes that he needs to pass his class, which means he needs to memorize their information, knowing that it's not true, so that he can take the test at the end of the week or end of the quarter. So crazy. So this all really started for us as a country during those heart healthy years, the invention of heart healthy. There was a lot of focus coming from Washington, D.C. when one of our presidents had a cardiac event, and that's where this was born out of. He's like, we are seeing a rise in cardiovascular diseases, and I want to stamp this out. Well, unfortunately, the advice that they received from it was called the 7 country study about cholesterol and fats was not scientifically proven. And I do have a podcast. I'm going to have to get which number it is. I don't have it at the top of my head, where I talk a little bit about the truth and the myth behind a lot of things that we grew up understanding with fats. But this advice of eating a low-fat diet and a high whole grain diet, it has put us in the position that we are in today. And it's just faulty and misleading science. And this was at the helm of snacking. The American Heart Association created the dietary guidelines, and here you go. Eat more carbs and less fat. We get hungry, and now we actually have a need to snack. So just a quick reminder, carbohydrates, I want to talk about the macronutrients. Carbohydrates are a quick source of fuel for the body. Carbs burn fast and hot, and foods that are higher in carbs are typically higher in sugar. So carbohydrate, sugar, glucose, all the same words, right? The best carbs to consume, because we shouldn't be afraid of carbs. We do need to consume them. They're not mandatory because we can get sugar from other parts of our body, and I'm going to talk about that later, how we store sugar. So you don't have to go and search for them in nature, because even broccoli has carbs. I'm talking about dense source of carbs, even something healthy like an apple, or then you have your refined source of carbs like in a piece of bread or pasta. And the best carbs to consume, of course, are the whole unprocessed foods like apples or berries. But even eating too much of wholesome carbs or food that are loaded with carbs is a bad idea. Now let's move on to proteins. Proteins are a moderate source of fuel for the body, unlike the quick-burning carbohydrates. They burn quite a bit longer than the carbs do, but not quite as long as fats do. And it is important to know that proteins are very important for building muscle and making hormones, especially thyroid hormones. We need those amino acids. Now moving on to fats. Fats are the longest burning fuel for the body. We want natural fats and unprocessed fats. Those are the best choices. Now, our body needs different kinds of fats, roughly about 65% saturated, 35% monounsaturated, and 5% saturated is a baseline. I'm not going to give you all the examples, but a good example of saturated fat would be animal fats like beef. Good, nice saturated fat, or eggs, or chicken. Monounsaturated fat would be something like olive oil. And polyunsaturated fats are nuts and seeds and the oils that are in fish, like salmon. So fats are the building blocks of the body. Fats make hormones, and they're instrumental in hormone balance and blood sugar regulation. So every second of every day, our bodies are trying to produce energy and keep you in what is called homeostasis or balance for optional, feels like it sometimes, optimal function. So to produce energy, we need to eat foods that contain energy. A calorie is just a measurement of energy. So that's when you look at that calorie number on the back, it says 300 calories. That's just saying how much energy you are going to get from eating that food. But not all calories make the same quality of energy. So let's just say you eat a big box of Girl Scout cookies. That may be a lot of energy, a lot of calories, but it's going to be short-lived. Those cookies do contain a lot of sugar, aka carbs, and they're processed carbs, to be accurate, and we won't go into the preservatives and chemicals and everything else that are in those Girl Scout cookies. But you will have a nice energy blast or some sort of like sugar rush, followed closely by a sugar crash. So nobody eats a box of cookies and engages in a long-distance run, right? You realize that you're going to poop out, that this is just a little bit of a temporary sugar high, and not even one that feels good at the time. Now, let's compare that with the feeling of having a couple eggs, maybe over a big bed of spinach and broccoli, and hey, maybe even half an avocado with that. Now, that's a breakfast that will give you some energy right now and loads of energy that's going to sustain you over the next 4 to 6 hours. Now, I know that nobody listening to this episode here or this podcast is going out and eating a whole box of Girl Scout cookies for breakfast. That's not how we're rolling here. We're intelligent people, and we aren't fooling ourselves with some of these kind of wants in our minds. Now, back when we were younger, we could get away with that, and that is a metabolism kind of issue, but that is changing in all the hormone stress and dysregulation that we're seeing in younger people. So many of us have been raised to think that a bowl of whole grain cereal, we were always eating oatmeal or cream of wheat or grape nuts in the morning, or a couple of slices of whole grain toast, and maybe a glass of orange juice would be considered a balanced breakfast. Maybe some of your households would have put some country crock, or Smart Beat Smart Balance came out, I feel like, when I was about 20 or something. That would have been in the early 90s. But that is not a balanced breakfast. It pretty much holds the same amount of energy and quality and nutrients. Well, maybe there's more nutrients in that than the box of cookies, but it is just as empty as far as giving you lasting energy. The same can be said for a lot of people that go through and get their traditional Starbucks latte with whatever kind of pumps of vanilla in the morning, or maybe people that just grab these breakfast bars, which are higher in sugar than you actually think. And over time, we become sugar addicts, and we need to snack. And the big issue is that it is both a physical, biochemical problem as well as a mental and behavioral issue. There's a lot of emotions tied together with eating and what we're allowed to eat and how we eat communally or in our car or whatever, and all of that affects our digestive process. So what it looks like now is we are no longer putting together nutrient-dense breakfast. As a matter of fact, I sit down with client after client, and this is one of the big struggles. A lot of people aren't waking up hungry, for one, which is an indication of blood sugar issues and digestive issues. And then they're really not quite sure what to grab. We've had a lot of misinformation over the years. So couple that with the fact that everybody is selling us snack foods everywhere we go and other stimulants like coffee or whatever, it is no wonder that we are in the mess that we are in with blood sugar dysregulation and hormone imbalance, and like we've discussed in other podcasts, gut issues. So when I meet with clients, they fill out intake information. Some of it is online, some of it is in person. So let's just say that you're an online person and you have already filled out a lot of the intake forms, and one of the most important forms that you fill out is your food journal. And we go over it day by day. I'm looking at the time you wake up and the time you go to bed, how much water or other fluids you drink, your medication, your vitamins, your supplements, the foods that you eat, your digestive reactions, your energy levels, your emotional state, and how often you're having bowel movements, and any sort of exercise that you're doing. That is all covered in what I call your food and mood journal. And some of the things that I see happen on a frequent basis is there is a wake up out of bed, brush your teeth, pee, and the need for coffee. And a lot of people are even putting sugary things in their coffee. They might try and upgrade with a different type of creamer. Maybe a lot of women have discovered, if you listen to my last podcast about the disadvantage of dairy, maybe they do have a coconut creamer or whatever. But if you look at it, the vanilla coconut creamer or the almond creamers, where they're putting honey or some kind of sugary something into their coffee or morning tea. And it's not uncommon for women to either skip food altogether or grab a breakfast shake or a bar, which is different. I like people to have a good start to the day. That was something that my mom said, hey, I want to give you something to stick to your ribs. She would say, I want a good stick to my ribs kind of breakfast. And I did mention that skipping breakfast is common, and it's really is detrimental to the body and to your mind and your hormonal state and your mental state as having the wrong macronutrients, the wrong ratios of your carbohydrates, fats, or proteins. I do often see with a lot of women the need for a mid-morning snack. And it's usually something like yogurt or granola or nuts or something. Again, it is not uncommon to see a bar or some sort of convenience eating happen during this time. And I always ask them, what made you grab a snack? And usually it's low energy. We're just craving foods, feeling hangry, maybe even just bored eating. Like I just do it. I'm working at my desk or I'm around the house and I just open up the fridge, or I don't know, I just want a snack, a handful of almonds here, a cherry tomato there. It's just if it's around, I eat it. And then what is really common is the fear of missing out. You're around other people that are eating, whether they're small children or coworkers, or it's a meeting and something's on the table and they just feel like they want to be a part of what everybody else is doing. And then there's just the habitual eating. It's really rare for me to come across people these days that can even tell me that they're hungry, that they actually even get hunger signals anymore. They eat before they get hungry. It's just a habit. And of course, there's all the marketing. You can't even go to the craft store anymore without there being a wall of what they call snacks, which in a lot of cases are candy bars and other stuff. And after they eat or throughout the day, what I see in the mid-morning or any time really throughout the day is I see that they feel tired or bloated or constipated, unmotivated, anxious, headaches, just kind of all over the map, maybe even diarrhea or just feeling crabby or irritated. And so sometimes we go to food because we don't like how we're feeling, even if we're feeling bloated, even if we're feeling like we have a headache. There are a number of people that go to food just for mere comfort. So now we move on to my typical client. And my typical clients, most of them are really health-minded and they're really trying. So I see a lot of salads during the middle of the day, and I see a lot of trimmings and on the salad and cheese or croutons or salad dressings, whether they're bringing it from home, which is kind of rare, or they're eating out. We do see an awful lot of salads. I have to apologize if you can hear my son's birds, but it is springtime outside and they are like extra chirpy right now. So I covered them up, so I hope they're going to be quiet. But I wanted to move on to that salad that I was talking about. The salad typically is not enough. It's really common to see the energy dips in the afternoon with afternoon coffee or afternoon munching, grabbing that handful of granola, nuts, dried fruit, whatever it is. I see a lot of that on the food journals, along with headache. It's not uncommon to see dinner rather on the run, feeling stressed out, kids going here and there, or just lots of stuff to do. We're just busy people. And it's also not uncommon to see these women have to have a glass of wine in the evening to settle in. And the wine makes them hungry. Dinner is insufficient. Usually, if they're trying to grab something healthy, they might grab some fruit or if they don't even care, ice cream or whatever, and staying up much, much later than they should. So all day long, I see evidence of blood sugar dysregulation. I see fatigue and lack of motivation, food cravings, depression, headaches, anxiety, brain fog. Does this sound familiar? I remember feeling this way. But this isn't always the way we have lived as people, as humans. When we think of it traditionally, whether it's hunter-gatherer kind of thinking, or if it was just the pre-industrialization and pre-making all this processed foods, when more people had their own small farms, when not as many people lived packed out in these big cities where you could farm a little bit, and it was walking down to, say, the old school or the original school farmer's market. Back then, a farmer's kitchen, breakfast took a while. You didn't wake right up and stuff food in your mouth. Most things happened after chores, and even making breakfast would be a huge chore. From the time your eyes open to the time you're actually eating breakfast might be 2 or 3 hours. And it was typically a protein and fat, and definitely local, definitely seasonal, animal proteins, natural fats. Most cultures around the world, fermented foods are a mainstay, whether it is a fermented dairy like I talked about last week, or if it was something as simple as a sauerkraut, right? That was kind of how we preserved a lot of foods, was fermenting. And pretty much if you looked across the board, there was little to no sugar as far as in breakfast or in the diet in general, short of something like a honey or fruit that was in season. And those were pretty much a luxury and saved for special occasions. So blood sugar wasn't a real problem. And you had enough food and energy to get you by to lunch or maybe even dinner. And to be honest with you, many cultures, they didn't eat 3 times a day. They might have only eaten 1 time a day, but 2 seems to be about the average. Would it shock you to know that most Americans are eating 5 meals a day? And I say meals because the size of some of these snacks are really a meal. So when we were told to lower our fat intake and increase our carb intake, and of course depend on a lot of these modern industrialized foods and processed foods, we created a big deal problem, and we opened ourselves up to all kinds of illnesses and disease, and our bodies became basically stressed out. We talk a lot about that in my gut health and inflammation podcast, so you can listen on for those. The quality and the ratios that we have been, the quality of food, I should say, and the ratios of food that we have become accustomed to eating is typically just not fit for us as humans. especially when we're looking at the preservatives and our ability to ship foods all around the world. We're eating out of season for where we're living. And it's just this big food industry situation. The very people that are creating the guidelines for us to live by are creating addicts out of us to make sure that we just need what they have to sell. And that just ticks me off. I want to be empowered, and I want to be able to nourish my body with foods that are good for my body, not for some other companies or corporations' profit margin. Now, it's not just the carb, fat, and protein ratio that leads us to snacking, however. That marketing that I was talking about, that's a big thing. People also seek comfort. There's all the emotional reasons that we talked about earlier, like the fear of missing out. But it really is, there's a big finger that points at the blood sugar issues. And a lot of times we just need to detox it out. It's a bumpy ride. It takes about 3 weeks to really do it. This is something that I do in my restart class. And there are a few bumps along the way, like some headaches and some cravings that we have to deal with. But for the most part, people get through it pretty darn good. Even the clients that I have with diabetes or pre-diabetes, we really watch their blood, but the detox happens and they feel so good, and nobody wants to go back the way they were eating before and have to go through this again. They love it that they're able to finally go between 4 and 6 hours between meals and not always thinking about food and having food or snacks on your mind like I did when I was younger, always having to have snacks in my purse or diaper bags with the boys or whatever, plotting out the way along the road. Where can we stop because it's going to be 2 hours? Now, this is really important for women over 40. If you are 40 and over, I'm going to say it again, snacking is just not a good idea. Now, have you ever heard of your oat axis, OAT? This is a relationship between your ovaries, your adrenals, and your thyroid glands, all endocrine glands. Endocrine glands are your hormone glands. We have over 100 hormones in our body, and they have this intricate communication system. And the oat axis, the ovaries, adrenal, and thyroid, is a very important communication system, especially when we are going through perimenopause. One of the jobs of the thyroid is to help regulate your metabolism, which is what we are talking about today, your metabolism. So basically, your metabolism is how your body processes energy. Now, did you notice that your metabolism changed around 28? I bet you did. And it's changing now in perimenopause and then again in menopause. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that oat axis. The balance of our oat axis is very important, and that balance really starts to wobble and shift during perimenopause. For most women, that wobble happens between 35 and 51. I know I felt it. Things just started getting different, and the thinning of the hair, slower recovery from workouts, hot flashes, just different things were starting to happen. And we need to have that oat axis balance even when we are shifting gears and going through different seasons like perimenopause. Now, before you went through puberty, your adrenals handled your estrogen needs. I didn't know that for the longest time. Your adrenals handled your estrogen needs before you had your period. But once that menses or your period started, the ovaries took over full time, all throughout your reproductive years. Now, during perimenopause and menopause, that job is supposed to go back to the adrenals. I think of like a relay race and a baton being handed over. Now, we still produce estrogen in perimenopause and menopause, just a smaller amount. But we do also have less of a need. We're not making babies anymore. We're not ovulating anymore, which is the whole purpose, not the whole purpose, but a big purpose of estrogen. You know, estrogen is what makes us feminine. It gives us our breasts and our hips and just really sets us apart from men. But sadly, we have found in modern times that the adrenals who need to take that baton in the perimenopause years, they're too taxed by a lifetime during the reproductive years of just too much stress. So the adrenals pass that job or pass the baton to the thyroid. Now, the thyroid can assist here and make adjustments to make up for the lack of the natural protocol that isn't being observed, but it isn't very efficient. And now we have thyroid issues. So why does this happen? Mostly because of our diet and lifestyle choices. I myself had pretty darn good diet, certainly not like I'm eating today. 10 years ago, I wasn't eating like I was eating today, but I never had been a junk food eater. But I had mass amounts of stress, and I've talked about some of that stress in past episodes, and I was told that I had adrenal issues. I already knew I had blood sugar regulation issues, but I wasn't quite sure of how it all worked together. I was too stressed out, and that started a wicked cascade of body symptoms and burdens and issues that eventually developed into triggered my autoimmune disease. My story is very similar to many women's story and many women feeling stress. 1 in 4 women today are currently taking a prescription for mental health. And let's not forget about the toxic overload in the environment, our cleaners, the screens, the overhead lighting, our beauty products, hormone replacement therapy, there are water issues and food issues and chemicals are all around. And, I don't want to make anybody feel ashamed or like they're doing something wrong by taking a mental health prescription for anxiety or depression. But it is interesting to know that those prescriptions are actually designed for extreme stress and for acute situations and for short-term use, not forever. And I know plenty of women that have been on mental health prescriptions for 10 plus years. Our bodies are just stressed out. Our lives are stressed out. And our adrenals actually are in charge of managing the stress in our lives. This is where cortisol, epinephrine, and norepinephrine are produced. We sometimes call those adrenaline hormones. Now, what does all this have to do with snacking? So we already know that stress comes in many forms, not just the irritating coworker and bills that are too big you can't pay them and a car that needs a mechanic that you can't afford to pay. But your adrenals also handle the stress that comes with blood sugar dysregulation. See, I knew I'd swing back around to it. So this is another axis, and it is called your HPPA axis. It stands for your hypothalamus, pituitary, pancreas, adrenal group. There's a special communication system between your hypothalamus, pituitary, pancreas, and your adrenal glands. This is how your blood sugar balance or regulation is actually kept. It's like a feedback loop to the hypothalamus, like your thermostat on the wall. You don't want it too cold and you don't want it too hot. Now, you probably already know that your pituitary gland is your master gland in your body. I think of the pituitary gland like a conductor before an orchestra. And the orchestra are all of our other little endocrine glands, and they're keeping their eye on the pituitary gland. But the hypothalamus is like a guy behind the curtain that we can't see, and he's giving little signals, maybe via, like I think of like law enforcement, those little ear microphones and speakers that the pituitary can hear, and then the pituitary passes on the information. So this is actually how it works. So when the hypothalamus detects that your blood sugar is too high, maybe from your whole grain cereal breakfast and your coffee with vanilla creamer, it cues your pituitary gland, who then cues the pancreas to release insulin. Now, insulin is a hormone that takes sugar or glucose that's circulating around in your blood and stores that sugar. It goes right to the cell. It's like knocks on the door. The cell opens up the door to receive the sugar in so that it doesn't circulate around in your bloodstream, which is toxic to the body. Now, those cells that store sugar get it out of the bloodstream are your liver, your skeletal muscles, and if need be, your adipose tissue, which is your fat tissue. So the HPA axis, your hypothalamus, your pituitary, your pancreas, your adrenal, and adipose tissue all help you stay not too cool and not too hot like your thermostat, not too low a blood sugar, not too high a blood sugar. Now, insulin is a fat storage hormone. So if you consume a diet that prompts your body to release more and more insulin on the regular, you are prompting fat storage also on the regular, as well as risking insulin resistance in the future. I don't know if you might be diabetic or know somebody that is diabetic. You probably do. You'll notice that they continue to gain weight year after year, especially once they start injecting insulin. And that is why, because even though the insulin is helping to remove the blood sugar from their bloodstream, it's pushing it into the adipose tissue or the fat cells. That is because for a diabetic or a pre-diabetic, the cells that are located in their liver and their skeletal muscles have become resistant to the urging or the knocking of the insulin hormone. It starts to ignore the signal and doesn't let the sugar or the glucose come into the cell and out of the bloodstream. So how modern Western medicine deals with that is they just say, well, let's just shoot more at it. Just a bigger fire, just more insulin. And that isn't the answer. Like I've talked about in the past, a great book to read by Dr. Fung is The Diabetes Code, to where he says, hey, rather than putting more insulin on the job, why don't we just lower the sugar that's coming in? One of the things that I find really frustrating and heartbreaking is diabetics that are working with nutritionists out of hospitals and working with their doctors are told to eat foods, they are encouraged to eat foods that actually keep their diabetes in a state of disease and out of control. It's so frustrating. They tell me what they eat and they don't understand why I am giving them different information from their doctors. So I educate them on this front, but I also put them in front of other doctors like Dr. Fung in the Diabetes Code, and I educate them. That way they can take that information to their doctors, because in all honesty, this nutrition talk that we have on a weekly basis is way more nutrition education than your average doctor gets when they're in medical school. Most medical schools don't even require nutrition units at all. So they're given protocols. When you have somebody with a diabetic or pre-diabetic protocol, this is how we treat it. And in Western medicine, they treat it with insulin. And this is why we see our diabetics continuing to gain more and more weight and continuing to cascade with more and more symptoms that are really inflammatory to the body, on the body, and they develop more and more issues. So we're going to move on here. So your hypothalamus receives this feedback and that all is well and that insulin production pushed that sugar into the cells and everything is fine. Now, once your hypothalamus sees that the blood sugar levels are back to a normal and safe range again, then all is well. Everything stops. It's like, oh, we don't need to do anything else. The healthy range for blood sugar is typically between 80 millimoles per deciliter and 100 millimoles per deciliter. So it just kind of rises and it's a gentle rise after an hour or two after you eat a meal, and then it comes back down again, but it doesn't go below 80. And then when you eat lunch again, it goes back up to maybe about 100. And if you wonder about your blood sugar levels, then I recommend going down and getting a glucometer. You can get one for $50-$60 right off of Amazon, have it in your house in a couple days, and kind of see what's going on with your blood sugar and what happens after you eat certain foods. So low blood sugar, this is the reverse of what's happening. Now you don't have enough glucose or blood sugar running around or circulating in your bloodstream. It's too low. In that case, the signal is given to the pancreas again, but instead of releasing insulin to help move sugar out of the bloodstream, another hormone called glucagon is called on to take the stored sugar that was stored in your liver and your skeletal muscles and put it back into the bloodstream for circulation around the body. It's really a neat system, and I wish that we would learn about these kinds of things when we were younger, and also the signs that we need to look for and what would actually keep us from becoming insulin resistant in the first place. But that's part of what I'm doing, is just trying to educate. And I hope you pass this information off to your friends and family and share this and educate your own children. So now your very smart body has course corrected. You are once again in blood sugar homeostasis, and it feels pretty good. Oh yeah, but now it's 10:30 in the morning, and that sugary breakfast of whole grain cereal has already burned up, and the HPAA access job is going to have to kick in again. You are hungry. Your blood sugar is dropping dangerously close below that 80 millimoles per deciliter number. You might start to feel lightheaded, dizzy, weak, fatigue. You need to eat. You're definitely hungry. I used to go through like, forget it. Now I don't want to eat because the thought of food would kind of make me feel nauseous. We called it feeling weird. We're getting weird. So it's this cycle that was constantly happening to me every 2 hours. And the foods that I would typically grab to get me out of that would cause too high of an insulin surge. And I just rode this terrible roller coaster all the time. So it's not uncommon to grab something sweet for a quick boost because you're feeling crappy. But most women, especially women about my age, around 48, we know that we don't want to have a glass of orange juice or something sweet. We're going to gain weight. So we grab coffee instead. We grab fake energy, and it's like adrenaline in the body, like a fake adrenaline in the body. And our body can't really be fueled by caffeine. It can't. It is a short-term push. It's like getting behind someone's car and giving it a push is not the same as having an engine that works and they step on the gas, right? It's a short-term solution. So even after we have that coffee, it might have helped us wake up in the morning, clear out our brain fog a little bit. It might help us with the mid-morning or afternoon dips, but we tend to feel more tired and wired. And we also tend to have food cravings because we are not nutritionally being taken care of. We have these little Band-Aids that are happening that are giving us a little bit of temporary push, like behind the car, but it's certainly not fuel. Our body can't run off of caffeine. So our body continually is going to turn to cortisol to help us out. When that blood sugar goes below 80, our fight or flight mechanism is turned on in that HPAA axis, and your body, until you get the food, is going to go a little bit of burst of cortisol. Is it a little burst? Typically not. Typically, it's like a big faucet being turned on that we rarely turn off because we've got cortisol doing a lot of functions in the body that it shouldn't have. So some women can make it to lunch. They can kind of like mentally starve themselves. Women, we have been trained to do without, to sacrifice, and to diet. And some of them that don't want to have a diet mentality, that are thinking nutrition, they're going to grab a handful of nuts and dried fruit or a bar or a Greek yogurt. And our body does thank us for those better choices, but truly, we shouldn't have needed it in the first place. And we should have been able to make it till lunch without this whole crazy blood sugar cycle having to continue. And eating every 2 hours, it's not optimal. We need to give our body an opportunity to rest. Our digestive system definitely needs to rest. So did you know that cortisol, like insulin, is also a fat storage hormone? Ever hear of cortisol belly? Oh, amen. I know so many people that actually eat a fantastic diet and they exercise, but because they don't manage their stress, they just have this belly fat. And it's really hard to watch it happen. And I'm always so grateful when they finally give me a call and I can help them out. So we may not be able to reduce your stress in your life. I mean, come on, we're busy. We've got a lot of things going on, but we certainly can do something about the influence of our eating and our lifestyle habits and what that does to our overall adrenal function. So your overall stress level and your overall hormonal balance can be improved. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. Now, remember, your adrenals share an axis. They're also part of the OAT axis, not just that HPAA axis I was talking about for blood sugar regulation. It's also part of the ovary adrenal team, and it's working overtime. So your thyroid hormone, your thyroid gland helps you decide and set and manage your circadian rhythm. That is your, it's time to wake up, it's time to go to bed, hormone and natural feeling. Now, it works alongside cortisol with that. We need cortisol. It's what begins to slowly wake us up in the morning. For most people, it's somewhere around 3 a.m. and it starts to slowly bring you up and out of that deep sleep mode that hopefully you were in. And blood sugar regulation and involving the cortisol, involving your adrenals and cortisol is important, but it helps keep you from the need to snack throughout the day. And it also helps keep you sleeping well throughout the night, because elevated nighttime cortisol and low morning time cortisol is very common for women over 40. So when we go in perimenopause and we say we're just having issues sleeping, we need to make sure that they also check our hormone, not just estrogen levels or just thyroid levels, but you need to get one of my favorite tests. Is called the Dutch test, and we'll talk about that on another episode, but it is a stress hormone test. There's saliva, there's urine, there's a lot to it. There's different times a day, but you really need to know those numbers. What is your nighttime cortisol? What is your early morning cortisol? What is your cortisol like during the day, to get the whole picture? So there's nothing worse than feeling wired and tired at bedtime. You just lay there and you just can't shut off your brain. Or maybe you're the type of woman that you can drift off easily, but then you wake up and stay up in the middle of the night at odd hours and you just can't seem to get back to sleep. Either case, your HPAA axis or your OAT axis are definitely screwed or skewed, whichever way you want to look at it. And this is something that we can work on easily together. The more messed up this is, the bumpier your ride is going to be into menopause. I'm just going to say that. And this is where you're going to see increased hot flashes and definitely more night sweats. Now, for many women, this is a daily battle, and this blood sugar dysregulation, it's not something that just happens during the work week. It's all the time. It's for weeks on end, months on end. And this is where we see insulin resistance happen. That is that setup for prediabetes and diabetes. And also, we're looking down the road at of conditions like Alzheimer's being related to this. So basically, your body at the cellular level becomes less influenced by insulin over time. And your circulating blood sugar levels get too high. And now you're looking at that prediabetes or diabetes that I was talking about, and systemic, just overall inflammation, gut issues. And that's what we want to avoid. So your blood sugar dysregulation, can it be your snacking? Is your snacking the cause of a lot of this? You know, I've seen it. A lot of times it really is. Your water intake, your meal macronutrient ratio, and what you even do between meals is all part of this big puzzle, or these proper accesses that are trying to achieve homeostasis for you. And it is frustrating to feel so tired and yet so wired at time. And it is nice when you do have that little bit of food that it gives you the pep up. And that is something else that we get addicted to. It's kind of like like a little win. We got a little win for that. So let's move on. I did want to mention that poor sleep. I'm sorry if you're not getting good sleep right now, but it is really, really common for women over 40. And it is one of the things that I enjoy helping other women with the most. I sleep like a rock. I was always a really rather light sleeper for most of my life. And when I figured out this stuff, I sleep like a rock. I actually fall asleep quickly. I don't move all night, and I wake up ready to go in the morning. And some of you know, we get up pretty early. Around 4 o'clock in the morning is our usual time to get up. So if you choose hormone replacement therapy, or if you're on hormonal birth control, or if you're taking thyroid medication, you're probably told that a lot of these issues, the fatigue and the weight gain and the hot flashes, would subside. But sadly, most women see that it doesn't help. They might get a little bit better, but they're still dealing with a lot of these issues. And the wrestling is just like one more thing. And you just want to throw it into the hormone pile. But I can tell you, this is something that we can fix. I'm going to say it one more time. Women over 40 shouldn't snack, okay? You shouldn't snack, and it can result in insulin resistance, like we talked about, weight gain, hot flashes, and systemic inflammation. So if you walk away with anything today, I really, really want you to remember that. I want you to remember that insulin and cortisol both encourage fat storage. And even though hot flashes are still a modern mystery, we know they are correlated with big hormonal swings. So now that we know how our blood sugar regulation works and we know a little bit about the HPPAA axis and the OAT axis, what do we do about it? What are some steps that you can take to work through this on your own? Okay, I want you to write these down. Put me on pause if you want, or listen to them once if you're driving around or doing errands. But I'd like you to try and write these down. Number 1, start your day off with water and some lemon. That means you wake up. If you're like me, you head right to the bathroom and you go potty. Your body's been doing a lot of detoxing. You got to get that stuff out. But start drinking water all day from this point forward. I always say this is a great time to grab maybe a 32-ounce water jar or canister, and this is where you start. A hydrated body won't give off those snack signals. Sometimes you're just thirsty and you think you're hungry. So number 1, start that day off with water and lemon. Number 2, give up or reduce coffee and caffeine to 1 to 2 8-ounce cups per day max. I recommend no caffeine during this period of our lives. I'm really struggling with that. I'm caffeine free, but I like the taste of caffeine. I just like it. But I'm not doing it right now because the reward that I'm getting for having my hormones balanced and I don't have the hot flashes and things right now, the night sweats, is totally worth it for me. And caffeine is really hard on your adrenals, and I'm working really hard on keeping my stress levels low and managed because elevated cortisol is not so bueno on joint inflammation and gut inflammation for that matter, both which are very important to me. So we need to keep our adrenals happy while our OAT axis is changing and shifting during these perimenopause and menopause years. So if you're like me, you can consider switching to maybe a coffee alternative like Rasa or 4-Sigmatic. It's FOURSIGMATIC. I know it's a hard one, 4-Sigmatic. Or maybe consider, like I do, I have my Rasa, which is adaptogenic herbs. You can find them at wearerasa.com. And you can make it a fat coffee. I call it a coffee, but it's just my morning drink, where I put some MCT oil in there. I just got back on ghee, or sometimes I use like the coconut manna, put some turmeric, cinnamon, or whatever. It's delicious in the morning. I have that. While I'm making that, or my husband is making that, I dedicate time in the morning to journaling. Now, for me, it's a little bit longer time frame, but for you, I'm going to ask you, if you're not doing it yet, to start with 5 to 10 minutes of journaling. And journaling helps. We've talked about in the past. It can get all of your thoughts kind of out in an orderly way. You can complete a thought and maybe read a self-improvement book. My self-improvement book is the Bible, and I journal as I read, and I try to improve myself and get that outside perspective, and it allows me to set my intention and tone for the day, and I'm de-stressed just going through that process. Number 4 is meditate. Now, I go meditate for anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes, and I'm meditating on what just happened. What did I just journal? What do I need to pray about? What do I need to sit quietly and kind of think about? I feel like we don't do a lot of that, just sit quiet and think anymore. There's also great guided apps, whether you need a guided experience or you already know how to sit quietly, would be present with your own thoughts, it doesn't matter. But if you need to get an app, if you need to get help, do it. I just started trying out Insight Timer. I heard about that from Sean Miner from the Unstuck podcast. Sean was a guest on the show, and I really like it. You don't have to pay for it. You don't have to sign up for a free trial, 7-day trial. You can just start using it, and it has timers to set. So if you want to do 5, 10, 15 minutes, you can preset that in there, and a little sound will go off and you can choose your sound. Or they have verbal journeys where it's somebody maybe talking to you about de-stressing or about being present during the day or gratitude or whatever category you want, or they even have musical journeys where they just play music in the background while you sit for a specified amount of time. And we need to start our day out with that type of reduced stress and that peace, and we'll find that it helps us manage stress as things come at us throughout the day, because there's no such thing as no stress out there. Now, I want you to take this seriously. There's a lot of science and there's a lot of research behind the positive effects of meditation. So I just say do it. If you want to research about it, there's a great book by Emily Fletcher, and it's called Stress Less, Do More, and it is meditation for busy people. I've read it. It's a great audiobook. It's in paper, or it's a hardback book too. It's really great. And she talks about the benefits of meditating 2 times a day, which is what I always strive for. But honestly, I always kind of suffer with the second one. I usually end up doing it just sitting outside and having more of like a nature time, which is still really great. And, don't fear the science or silence. Our modern worlds leave no room for silence, and I am super guilty of this. Lately, I started making myself listen to absolutely nothing in my Jeep when I go grab my son for school in the afternoon. It's about 15 minutes away, and I tell you what, it's really hard. I feel like I'm wasting time. I feel like I should grab my phone. I've got this urge to grab my phone, turn a podcast on, turn on my stereo for, AM news, what's going on, or just to listen to music. And even that is putting stuff in our heads. Instead, I'm just trying to listen to what's going on as I'm driving. If I can have my windows down, like today I hopefully will be, I just drive in silence and smell what I smell and look around. And it is getting easier, but it was really, really hard. And because it's so hard, it just really tells me that how I'm addicted to noise and stimulation. So the other day, yesterday, I put on my Insight timer because I had a 20-minute drive to go meet one of my clients at her place. And I just put in some soothing music, just something very like yoga-like music. And I just drove listening to that on my way to my client. It was actually great. When I left the house, I had felt very rushed and kind of wound up and like, oh, I've got to do all of this stuff for my business and all of these family errands and different things. But by the time I pulled up at her house, I actually felt really relaxed and refreshed and was able to give her 100% of my attention and myself. So number 5, we're moving on to start journaling your food. This is throughout the day. You don't do it at the end of the day. I want you to do it all throughout your day. And I want you to log how you feel throughout the day. I listed earlier what my clients log. I definitely like a food and mood log throughout the day. Why? Because we need to find your perfect balance of that ratio of carbs, fats, and proteins. We need to look for, isn't that funny? Every time I have eggs, it makes me very tired. Could be some sort of sensitivity or allergic reaction or intolerance. That's what your food journal is basically like your crystal ball. You got to look at it and you got to know what you're looking for in there. So for breakfast, I always recommend a protein, fat, and a fiber. That might be a veggie and egg scramble or a green smoothie if you're not doing eggs, with a full fat canned coconut milk or other nut milk in it, and maybe some MCT oil. But when you have a protein, fat, and fiber for breakfast and you don't start your day off with sugar, it's going to help with that snacking, and you'll be able to make it. So when you do feel your snack cravings coming on, you need to ask yourself why. Is this just a habit? Is this because this is what I've always done? Was this maybe because I didn't have the right breakfast? Do I have low blood sugar? Go test it. Grab a glucometer, if you have one. If your blood sugar is looking a little bit low, then grab some protein and fat, right? And don't grab the dairy. This is not a time to grab the cheese sticks. You need to listen to last week's podcast to learn why, and then you can give me a call or give me some comments and tell me what you think. But this is the area where health coaching really, really shines. This is where I work to find these answers with my clients. This is where we discover if something might be beyond just macronutrient ratios and habits, and we figure out how to fix it. Okay, so moving on to number 6, set a lunchtime. That really works for me if I know what my goal time is going to be. And I make sure that I'm prepared. If I'm not prepared or if I stretched it out too long, I'm going to overeat, and that's not going to be good. Digesting food requires energy. If you eat too big of a meal, it's going to use a whole bunch of energy. And believe it or not, that's going to make you tired. So there's also the amount of food that you're eating. So be reasonable. If you have breakfast at 6, taking a lunch at 11 or 12 sounds about right. Stretching it until 1 might be too much. You might be over hungry and overeat. And the chances are that if you blood sugar dipped too low and you weren't feeling well, and you were gutting it out with willpower, your darn cortisol levels might have had to kick in. And instead of starving yourself and thinking that you're getting a little bit skinnier, you might have just told your body to store more fat with that cortisol. So another thing to remember here is to know your cycle. And I'm talking about your menses. One little thing is here, estrogen naturally increases your hunger. It makes you hungry. So if you're still cycling those first 14 days or so until you ovulate, your estrogen levels are gradually getting higher. So you might notice around ovulation time that you're naturally hungry. So that also comes into play if your hormones are all out of whack, or if you're at the latter stages of perimenopause. That's when estrogen really starts to go high and really starts to go low, and we start to see those hot flashes. So for me, knowing about my menses also helps me say, am I hungry, or is this just my estrogen making me hungry? So if you don't know what your estrogen situation is like, then I encourage you to go to my website, thepathforhealth.com. Right there on the front page, you can see I have a free hormone quiz. You're going to figure out your status of your cortisol and your estrogen and testosterone and thyroid hormones and progesterone. It's not a diagnostic test, but it's at least going to give you a good look based on your symptoms, based on how you feel. And it's going to help you with some of these snacking and feelings and cravings. Now, before you grab that food, right, before you grab that snack, make sure that you drink some water, maybe 8 ounces of water. Go outside, get some fresh air, do some squats, figure out if you really do need some food. A little quick note on that is I know when I'm doing a lot of brain work, when I'm doing a lot of writing, content writing and such, I notice that I get very hungry because of it. And your brain actually uses about as much energy as your body does when it's doing a moderate workout. So it could be a legit need. But ask yourself some questions. Have that drink of water. Go outside before you grab the food. And remember the meditation that we were talking about? It could just be stress. It could be stress that's making you hungry. A bored eater, a stressed eater. We have all of these conditions, and we're living in such a rich time where food is just everywhere. We're so wealthy in food everywhere. Emily Fletcher and myself, we both from like her meditation, her Ziva meditation program in Stress Less, Do More, recommends twice daily meditation. I recommend that second meditation happen in the afternoon when energy might be the lowest for you. That's what I do. If I'm feeling like my energy is getting a little bit low, I take my afternoon meditation, and I'm not dogmatic about it. It doesn't have to be with Insight Timer. I can just go outside. I can just do something quiet, and that works too. Taking a walk, looking around in nature, that's a wonderful form of meditation. Even doing a moving meditation like Tai Chi and getting your phone out with YouTube and saying, I'm going to do 15 minutes of YouTube Tai Chi. It's a great form of meditation. You have to focus on the movements that you're doing and how you're doing them. And the afternoon, instead of reaching for a snack or reaching for caffeine, this is a great time to do it. And it'll give you that energy boost that you're looking for. Then we're on to number 7. When you're having dinner, make sure that 75% of dinner is non-starchy veggies and the rest of it protein, and definitely 1 or 2 tablespoons of fat, right? This is not a great time for carbohydrates for women our age. I'm just telling you. Each meal should be set up like that. 4 to 6 ounces of protein, 1 to 2 tablespoons of additional fat outside of what's already in your protein, and the rest should be non-starchy vegetables. This is not for the corn and the sweet peas and stuff like that. This is for cruciferous vegetables, right? So for perimenopause perimenopause and menopause women, I recommend loads of cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and kale and all that stuff, right? It helps detox out our hormones, and it's really great for hormone health. And also, don't forget to include sulfurous vegetables like your onions and your garlic. They also help with detox and reduce overall inflammation. And if you have blood sugar issues and if you have stress issues, trust me, you have inflammation issues, and we need to eat foods that help eliminate the metabolites and basically like the residue or the buildup from having chronic and systemic inflammation. So as always, I say 1 serving a day for fermented food that's great for your gut health and your overall body stress. What's good for your gut is good for your brain. It's good for your overall stress reducing attempts. And when it comes to fruit, I always say seasonal, and I suggest low glycemic fruit, which typically is going to be your berries and your lemons and your limes. So a little bonus tip before we move on is sometimes you are eating all the right foods, but just not enough fat. Or maybe you have too much protein. Our body will take too much protein and it will actually convert it to sugar. So we want to make sure that doesn't happen. So the first thing I look at is, if I'm feeling snacky, did I get enough fat? I love fat and I cook with liberal amounts of it. This is not an episode where we're going to be busting into high fat diets and keto or whatever. But I tend to lean towards a higher fat diet, but also a higher fiber diet, and also a diet that probably 90% of the foods that I eat are vegetables. I just have a side of meat kind of a thing. So if that's such a thing, I don't know. Somebody should name it something. Now, when it comes to food sensitivities, it can be a little bit trickier, but today is not about that. So just because you're tired doesn't necessarily mean, if you're tired and want a snack, that you didn't have the right ratios of foods for that previous meal. It could actually be that you're having a sensitivity or some sort of reaction to a food that you chose. So that takes a little bit more investigating. You're certainly capable of doing it yourself. You just kind of need to know how to do it. That's an excellent segue into maybe if you've been a paleo eater, maybe moving into maybe the odd, and that's not doing the trick for you. You still have pain and inflammation and fatigue or blood sugar issues. You might want to look at the autoimmune paleo path. And Dr. Sarah Ballantyne is a great resource for that, as am I. I've done and I'm still doing the AIP diet. I'm in the reintroduction phase right now, but we'll see what's ahead for me. I thank you so much for listening today. I'm going to go over those 7 steps really quickly again. Start your day with water and some lemon. Give up or reduce coffee and caffeine. Dedicate 5 to 10 minutes per day for journaling. This is in the morning, dedicate 5 to 15 minutes of morning meditation. Maybe even do that again in the afternoon during your low energy time. Number 6, set a lunch time. Oh, wait, I forgot one. Number 5, start journaling your food and how you feel throughout the day. Number 6, set a lunch time and be prepared and don't overeat or push it too far away. And number 7, make sure that when you eat dinner, and pretty much all your plates for that matter, at least 75% of your plate is non-starchy vegetables, and then the rest can be protein, and always making sure you have enough fat per meal. Thank you again for listening. Give me your thoughts on this. I never know if this is what you want, if this is as deep as you want. Was it too deep? I gotta know. I enjoy doing this for you. It warms my heart, and I just want to reach out and give you the tools that you need. As always, if you need assistance, please don't hesitate to send me a message, send me an email. Make sure that you're following me on Facebook and Instagram. We do have the Facebook group. It's called Is This Hormones or Is It Autoimmunity? You can find that. And I have lots of recipes, and we have a lot of great discussions. And I post on it every day. Try really hard to post on it at least one time a day and give something of value. So please share this. That means a lot to me when you comment. It means a lot to me when you ask me questions. I don't feel like I'm speaking out to the void here. And I just appreciate you, and I appreciate what you're doing and taking charge of your own health. So I hope to see you in digital world or in real life sometime, and enjoy your day. Summer is almost upon us, and I have some new things coming up in store for you to get you ready for that. So have a wonderful day. Blessings. I'll see you later. This is Brandy signing off for the Path for Health.